Toxic invisible emission particles represent one of the most severe yet least recognized threats to global public health and environmental stability. These particles, often known as particulate matter or ultrafine particles, are microscopic pollutants emitted from industrial processes, vehicle exhaust, power generation, chemical reactions in the atmosphere, and numerous human activities that involve combustion. Unlike visible smoke or dust, toxic invisible emission particles cannot be seen with the naked eye. Yet they pose a profound threat due to their ability to remain airborne for long periods, travel great distances, and penetrate deeply into the human respiratory system. As global urbanization increases and societies rely heavily on fossil fuels, industrial manufacturing, and transportation, exposure to invisible particulates has become nearly unavoidable. Their impacts are complex, spanning human health, climate systems, ecological integrity, and long-term sustainability. Toxic invisible emission particles vary greatly in size, chemical composition, and origin. Some are produced directly from combustion processes, while others form as secondary pollutants when gases such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, or volatile organic compounds undergo oxidation in the atmosphere. The smallest particles, referred to as ultrafine particles or PM0.1, are less than 100 nanometers in diameter and are considered the most dangerous. Due to their minute size, they evade the respiratory system's natural defense mechanisms, pass through alveolar membranes in the lungs, and enter the bloodstream. Once inside the body, they can penetrate internal organs and tissues, even reaching the brain through the olfactory nerve. These particles often contain heavy metals, organic toxins, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and other harmful compounds that provoke oxidative stress, inflammation, and cellular damage. One of the most significant health effects associated with toxic invisible emission particles is the development and exacerbation of respiratory diseases. Exposure to particulate matter is closely linked to asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, bronchitis, and lung infections. Urban populations living near highways, industrial complexes, or power plants experience higher rates of these conditions. The particles irritate airway tissues, trigger inflammatory responses, and reduce lung capacity over time. Children, whose respiratory systems are still developing, are particularly vulnerable. Studies consistently show that children raised in areas with high particulate pollution have higher rates of asthma and reduced lung development compared to those in cleaner environments. For elderly individuals and those with pre-existing respiratory conditions, exposure can lead to severe complications, increased hospitalizations, and premature death. Cardiovascular disease is another major consequence of exposure to toxic invisible emission particles. Once ultrafine particles enter the bloodstream, they interact with blood vessels, promote systemic inflammation, and increase oxidative stress. This contributes to the formation of plaque deposits in arteries, raising the risk of heart attacks, strokes, arrhythmias, and hypertension. Epidemiological studies show a clear correlation between spikes in particulate pollution and increased hospital admissions for cardiac events. Long-term exposure significantly increases mortality rates associated with cardiovascular diseases. Countries with consistently high pollution levels often see elevated rates of heart disease, not solely because of lifestyle factors, but due to chronic particulate inhalation. Beyond the respiratory and cardiovascular systems, invisible emission particles can affect nearly every major organ. Research has shown that nanoparticles can cross the blood-brain barrier, a protective boundary that typically shields the brain from harmful substances. When this barrier is breached, particles can initiate inflammation in neural tissues and contribute to neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. While these relationships are still under scientific investigation, mounting evidence suggests that chronic exposure to ultrafine particles accelerates cognitive decline and affects memory, learning, and overall brain function. In pregnant women, particulate exposure has been linked to low birth weight, premature birth, and developmental abnormalities in infants. Some toxic particles contain endocrine-disrupting compounds that interfere with hormone regulation, potentially affecting reproductive health in both men and women. Cancer is another long-term consequence of exposure to toxic invisible particles. Many particulates are classified as carcinogenic due to the presence of substances like benzene, formaldehyde, arsenic, cadmium, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. When inhaled, these compounds can damage cellular DNA, promote mutations, and initiate tumor formation. Lung cancer remains the most widely associated cancer, but particulate exposure has also been linked to cancers of the bladder, liver, and skin. Industrial workers, traffic police, miners and individuals living near refineries or chemical plants often face higher lifetime cancer risks due to persistent exposure. The mental health impacts of invisible particulate pollution are often overlooked but increasingly recognized. Living in polluted environments contributes to chronic stress and reduced overall quality of life. Pollution exposure has been linked to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and mood disorders, particularly in urban environments where pollution is combined with noise, heat stress, and urban crowding. These effects, although challenging to quantify, demonstrate the far-reaching consequences of invisible emission particles on human well-being. The environmental effects of toxic invisible emission particles are equally profound. When particulates settle on soil, water bodies, and vegetation, they alter ecological processes, reduce biodiversity, and contribute to ecosystem degradation. For example, particulate deposition on plant leaves reduces photosynthesis by blocking sunlight, damaging leaf tissue, and altering stomatal functioning. Over time, this results in reduced crop yields, slower forest growth, and weakened vegetation resilience. Industrial regions often show significant damage to plant life due to long-term exposure to airborne pollutants. Water bodies are also affected when airborne particles settle into lakes, rivers, and oceans. Heavy metals and chemical toxins can accumulate in aquatic ecosystems, affecting fish, amphibians, and aquatic plants. These pollutants move up the food chain through bioaccumulation, eventually affecting predators, birds, and even humans who consume contaminated seafood. Some particulates carry nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, which can trigger harmful algal blooms. These blooms deplete oxygen in water bodies, resulting in dead zones where no aquatic life can survive. This process has major economic consequences for fisheries, tourism, and coastal communities. Airborne particulate pollution also plays a significant role in climate change. Black carbon, one of the most dangerous invisible emission particles, absorbs sunlight and warms the atmosphere. It is considered one of the most powerful climate forcers after carbon dioxide and methane. When black carbon settles on snow and ice, it reduces surface reflectivity, causing faster melting of glaciers and polar ice caps. This accelerates sea level rise, alters global weather patterns, and amplifies climate instability. Additionally, particulate pollution can influence cloud formation and alter precipitation cycles, contributing to droughts in some regions and excessive rainfall in others. These complex interactions demonstrate how toxic invisible particles affect not only local air quality, but also global climate systems. Understanding the sources of invisible emission particles is essential for developing effective mitigation strategies. One of the primary sources is vehicle emissions, especially from diesel engines. Diesel exhaust contains high concentrations of ultrafine particles composed of soot, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and various organic compounds. Cities with heavy traffic or high numbers of older vehicles experience elevated pollution levels. While electric vehicles reduce tailpipe emissions, they do not eliminate particle pollution entirely, as tire wear, brake particles, and road dust still contribute significantly to ambient particulate levels. Industrial processes represent another major source. Factories, power plants, cement production, metal smelting, chemical manufacturing, and plastic processing emit large quantities of toxic particles. Many industries burn fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum, or natural gas, releasing sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds that later form secondary particulate matter. Even industries that do not rely on combustion often release dust, microplastics, metal particles, and chemical aerosols into the atmosphere. In some rapidly industrializing countries, inadequate regulations, outdated technology, and insufficient pollution control systems exacerbate emissions, resulting in severe air quality deterioration. Residential sources also play a significant role in particulate pollution, particularly in developing countries. The burning of biomass such as wood, charcoal, dung, and agricultural waste for cooking and heating generates large amounts of fine and ultrafine particles. Homes with poor ventilation trap these particles indoors, creating hazardous conditions for women, children, and the elderly. Indoor air pollution accounts for millions of premature deaths annually, highlighting the importance of clean cooking technologies and improved household ventilation. Agricultural activities are responsible for generating both primary and secondary particulates. The burning of crop residues releases soot and organic particles, while livestock operations emit ammonia, which reacts with other pollutants to form secondary particulate matter. Agricultural machinery, fertilizer application, and pesticide spraying also contribute to airborne particulate pollution. Dust storms triggered by land degradation and poor land management practices further add to global particulate levels, especially in arid regions. Natural sources, though not influenced by human activities, also emit particulate matter. These include volcanic eruptions, forest fires, sea spray, and soil dust. While natural emissions have occurred for millions of years, climate change and human land use practices have intensified wildfires and dust storms, increasing natural particulate contributions. The mixture of natural and anthropogenic particles creates complex challenges for air quality management and environmental protection. Marine environments are increasingly recognized as sources of invisible particulates, specifically microplastics, which enter the atmosphere when ocean waves and winds eject tiny plastic fragments into the air. These airborne microplastics are inhaled by humans and animals, contributing to respiratory inflammation and toxic exposure. Microplastic particles are now found in nearly every ecosystem, including polar regions and the deep ocean. A significant challenge in managing toxic invisible emission particles is the lack of public awareness. Because these particles cannot be seen, people often underestimate the risks or assume that air quality is acceptable when it may in fact be harmful. Furthermore, air quality monitoring systems are unevenly distributed worldwide, with many developing nations lacking the infrastructure to measure pollution levels accurately. Without reliable data, policymaking becomes difficult, and communities remain uninformed about the health dangers they face daily. Mitigation efforts require coordinated action from governments, industries, and individuals. Regulations such as stricter emission standards for vehicles, improved industrial filtration systems, and limitations on fossil fuel combustion are essential steps. Transitioning to renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, and hydrogen reduces reliance on combustion-based power generation. In addition, cleaner technologies for transportation, including electric vehicles and high-efficiency public transit, play a vital role in reducing airborne particulate emissions. At the industrial level, improved filtration technologies, closed systems, electrostatic precipitators, and scrubbers can dramatically reduce emissions of toxic particles. Many industries are transitioning to cleaner energy sources or adopting carbon capture and storage systems, which help decrease secondary particulate formation. However, these solutions can be expensive, and global implementation remains uneven. On a community level, promoting greener urban planning, expanding green spaces, and reducing traffic congestion can significantly reduce exposure to toxic particles. Trees and vegetation help capture airborne particulates, improving local air quality. Indoor air purification systems, proper ventilation, and reduced use of biomass fuels also contribute to cleaner air within homes and buildings. The long-term solution lies in transitioning toward more sustainable energy, transportation, and industrial systems. Cleaner fuels, renewable energy, reduced reliance on combustion, and circular economy models all contribute to minimizing particulate pollution. Educational campaigns that raise awareness about invisible pollutants empower individuals to make informed decisions and support policies that prioritize public and environmental health.